Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a preview for a brand new game going on Kickstarter. This is called Hour of Need. It is another modular deck game from your modular deck system that you've used in other games in the past. And we're welcoming back again the Sadler brothers to talk about the game. So where do you guys want to start? This is a superhero game, which I know you guys both love superheroes.
A little bit.
It's on everyone's mind right now with Marvel Champions, and you guys have been working on this one for a while. Talk about the game.
So this is a cooperative deck-driven game. It's going to be first for us because it's 1 to 4 in the core game, but you can buy expansions to make it 1 to 6. So it plays up to 6 player, which is really fun, and it's a lot faster than most of our games. It plays 6 players in under 2 hours usually, we've seen.
Yes, our first full official 6-player playtest with brand new players finished under 2 hours, which is pretty awesome.
Well, we can attest to that too. We just got done playing the game. We've played all of your games, including Alter Quest. We've played Street Masters and so forth, and those are more in-depth games. Doesn't mean this game is not in-depth because you have a lot of things that you're doing in it, but it does play extremely fast.
It's a very streamlined game.
And the fact that everyone can play their cards simultaneously, so there's constant communication that was happening at the table when we were playing.
Yeah, we wanted to make this our most accessible version of our MDS system to date.
Yeah, both with approachability and with price point, because we package the game in much smaller chunks. So now you can buy like a 1 to 4 player core game, which is kind of what you'll see here, but with more content. Or you can buy a 1 to 2 player box, which is just 2 heroes, a villain, and 2 issues. So you can kind of piecemeal what you want to play, or just buy it all together and play big 6-player games together. So
let's start there. The modular deck system. All right. So in this game you have the superheroes, and I take it there's going to be a wide variety of different heroes.
Yes.
You have the villain deck. So you're mashing those two up together, and then you have a third deck, which is called the issue deck.
Yeah.
But not only that, but you have several different maps, which kind of fold out comic book style to represent the city that you're fighting in, basically.
Right.
How do those mix together? You can basically mix any of those, right?
Right. Yeah. Like any of our modular deck systems, it's you basically pick which decks you want to play as, put them together, and start playing. This one, the hero decks are what you're using when you're playing. That's your hero. Every hero is unique, so you have your own play style. Each villain has their own deck, and then each issue has their deck, plus issue also has an issue board. And the issue is basically like the villain's objective. For example, in this demo kit here, we have the Century Heist issue, where the villain is trying to rob a bank. And so the issue deck will drive the villain trying to complete their objectives. As the heroes, you're trying to defeat the villain to win. Yeah,
this will tell you a story too, like of a comic book issue, like an issue of a comic book essentially. And this, for example, is New Crown City. You'll see the city map here, and these scheme panels out here represent certain spaces in there, like locations. So here's the bank, for example, and there's the scheme panel that represents what's going on in the bank, and the villain can go there and do certain bad things with the scheme effects. But other issues will have different things, like you might have an issue, it's an interior of a building, so it's more tactical and zoomed in, and these are like different rooms of that building or something. So there's a lot of flexibility in the design space of what we can do with what different stories we can tell with the issue deck. And
yeah, it's really interesting how you've basically brought this sort of like roadmap, if you will, to what things are going to typically happen in a deck game straight up, but you've got this sort of positional aspect to it too. So like characters and villains are going to be moving from these different spaces. They're going to be moving across the board. Your position is going to matter, where it doesn't in most sort of just straight up card games.
Right, yeah. There's a level of tactical decision making, and it's much more spatial. A lot of card-driven games can be more abstracted. This one everything's happening more visceral. And I think one of the coolest parts about how the villain works versus how the heroes work, this kind of the game plays out in like a 2-act system where the villain's hiding in these scheme panels doing their own nefarious plans while the heroes are out trying to solve problems. And you can't actually face the villain until you solve the villain's problem card. And once you solve it, it'll flip over, and then the villain will move to the map, and you have a showdown where you have to fight them to win the game. That's how your overall win condition works.
Yeah, and all the issues play out differently. They have different objectives, but they'll have a common setup where the villain is scheming, and every player will get their own scheme card assigned to them, and that's kind of like something you have to go take care of. And once all players have taken care of the schemes, then the villain can be confronted. So, for example, in this one, you might have drawn the locksmith, where the villain is hiring a locksmith to bust into the bank, and you have to go figure out that locksmith situation, flip it over. Oh, you found it's Locksley, this little minion you have to go defeat also. So every issue plays out differently. If you play the same issue every time, you can have different combinations with scheme cards come out and everything like that. So
Let's talk about the obvious comparison between this coming out very similar time frame to Marvel Champions, which is a game that all four of us have been playing pretty religiously.
Yeah.
The couple things that I wanted to point out, just that I notice, is some comparisons in the terminology. Obviously, there's scheming in this. The villain's trying to do their scheming in Marvel Champions. However, there is, as you mentioned, a very spatial awareness in this game that you have to pay attention to, where Marvel Champions is more abstracted down to the cards, and you're living through those cards and doing things to the villain. This, you have to use very tactical movement in the game, which is one of the actions you can take. And there's a variety of different actions that you can take just generically with the action token. So basically, the game boils down to trying to get in the right position at the right time.
Right.
Which is very different than Marvel.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And as excited as we both were when we were at Gen Con and saw the Marvel announcement, we were both really excited. But at the back of their head, in minds, we're like, "Well, we're about to announce a superhero game." So it's exciting, but oh man, bad timing.
But luckily it's getting a chance to, we got our copies, we're playing it and everything. And luckily, for us as game designers, we're playing Marvel Champions. Like, we love this, but luckily it's not really influencing too much about how we're designing our own game. And like, we can still enjoy both, as big superhero fans. I think there's room for, this more abstracted card game. And then this one has more, like you said, spatial elements. And if you like miniatures, great. There's miniatures for you too.
But at the same time, I feel like they both make you feel like you're playing a superhero.
Yeah.
So that's so like, if you like Marvel Champions, you play and you liked it, there's probably elements of this you like as well.
Yeah, they achieve similar things. Also, of course, this game has combat. Not only combat, but also sort of resolving their schemes using your solvability, using your basically the dice system, or very similar dice system that you've used in your other games, right?
Right.
One of the cool things too is that in Marvel Champions, the comparison is Marvel Champions, I'm taking my turn, and then you're taking your turn, and then you're taking your turn around the table, and then the villain. In this game, everyone's purely cooperating. Like, you are taking your actions whenever it behooves the group as a whole. So I could take one of my two actions, and then you could jump in and assist by taking one of your actions, and we could just go around the table in that way. So it feels like a more cooperative style game.
Right. Yeah, and there's much more hinging and there's more tactical choices because you have two actions, those action tokens there, and after somebody finishes their second action, they resolve all their threat cards. So it's kind of a negative consequence to solve your second action. So you might want to split up your actions and position yourselves. So it's kind of like that whole coordinating thing, like, oh, you go over there, then we'll jump the bad guy there. So there's a timing element, but it's also just always initiates conversation around the table and planning.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think an interesting thing, in addition to the mechanics impact that you just mentioned. The fact that in a lot of these games, you're sitting there waiting for your turn and going like, oh, I'm going to do this. And now you can just jump in and do that. Or if you have cards to play that really don't have an impact on anyone, you can just get them out on the board and ready to play if they're not using your actions.
Right.
Yes, there are several cards in this game that don't require an action to play, so you can do that a turn if you like. Okay, while you're attacking that guy, I'm going to play this constant to give myself a bonus over here. But the cards also have what we call heroic feat icons, where some of the cards can be used if you have it in your hand. You can just discard it to do a free action. So like, you have to decide, do I want this to play this for free, or do I want to save it to get that free action later, or to cancel an attack that an enemy's hitting me with? So the cards have kind of dual purpose there.
Yeah, and I like the thematic nature that it brings in because, for example, we have Gorilla here, the super soldier. He's all about having his knives out. Now he has these two knife cards in his deck, and you can play them out, and you can get attacks off when you play them. But they also have a guard ability on them. So if you keep them in your hand, it represents he's ready to take, to dodge an attack as opposed to being on the offense. So it has that thematic nature where you're balancing out whether or not it be offensive or defensive, and kind of that hand management. It just adds to the whole decision-making process on your turn.
I guess that's a good time to bring in being defeated in this game is not like player elimination. You don't lose if a hero is defeated. You lose if the villain completes their objective. But there are these things in the game called crisis effects, and pretty much when something bad happens in the game, it'll typically trigger a crisis effect, and that will lead to the villain winning. So even though your hero is defeated is not the end of the game, it could set you back.
And it's important to say you don't get eliminated. You're not out of the game. If you get defeated, you get a little setback, but you're still playing the game. You get back up on your feet for your next turn. You keep playing with everybody else. So.
And that's one thing I've appreciated about your games, and I'll relate it to the dice. I mean, a lot of you, if you're not familiar with their games, this is not a thing where you're going to roll dice and have a complete and utter failure. None of your games have that. No. For the most part, it's a lot of successes, and then there's always a face that basically gives you some mitigation for the future if you want to, or you can spend it, right?
Right.
Yeah, this is much like what we did for Alter Quest, if people are familiar with that, where we have focus tokens where there's a focus result on the dice, and if you roll one and you have focus, you can spend it to make that a success, and if you don't, you'll just gain it instead. That way, if you don't have any focus and you rolled all focus, oh, I didn't do what I wanted to do, but next time I have a lot of focus to help
Yeah, and
out.
that goes into another comparison with like Marvel Champions you mentioned, because hero cards are actually double-sided. So your character card's two-sided, but you're not going to your alter ego side. If you get enough focus, you can spend all 5 of your focus to flip over to your kind of super powered side and have like a super ability. And that's either like a one-time use thing or just a persistent stat upgrade to whatever one of your stats. So that's a cool choice too, is whether or not you want to spend that focus and convert to your super side, or if you want to hold on to the focus and mitigate dice more. It's your choice.
And that is also dependent on the hero. For example, in the base game, we have a hero named Micro Guy, and when he flips, he actually gets in and out of his mech.
Yeah, which is this
Micro
awesome
Guy
mech
is
here.
a scientist who shrunk himself down and could not grow back up.
He's
So-
still-
He doesn't get big, right?
doesn't
He
get
just
big.
has a mech that
He just has a
drives in.
human-sized
He's still
mech.
working on that problem of his, but yeah, he's just a little like action figure-sized guy that drives around in a mech,
So-
a human-sized mech.
Yeah, so when he's in his pilot side, he can solve like crazy. He can figure out anything, but when he's in his mech side is when he can do his big attacks.
Well,
So-
speaking of these miniatures too, you have a lot of common threads through a lot of your games, but one thing that should be known, if you are familiar with the Sadler's games, this is not a game at all like Street Masters or anything like that. It has miniatures, it has some of the same sort of dice systems and things like that you've used in other games, but this is a very sort of abstracted use of miniatures where you're running around this sort of like map from 30,000 feet as opposed to like really on the ground.
Right, yeah. And some issues will mess with that because there is an issue, for example, where you're in like inside of a bank and it's or not inside
Library.
of a library, yeah, and you're fighting guys off while they're trying to research something, and that's much more
Oh,
like that
interesting.
zoomed in. But it's still there's no special rules as opposed to movement and stuff. It's still the same. It just kind of changes the time frame of how those things happen.
And that kind of goes in with our accessibility plan with this game, where we wanted to have miniatures because we like miniatures, but we didn't want to have this game be just packed full of tons of miniatures to up the cost. So the core game itself you can get in the Kickstarter for I think $65 for just the core game, which is much less than our other games, but that is less miniatures. But you know, we might have ways and stretch goals to upgrade miniatures. We'll see.
Yeah, luckily right now, for example, we have, minions are tokens here and the bystanders are tokens, but there might be ways, to make those miniatures in the future.
If you want,
So,
it's not
if you want those
necessary,
aesthetic
but
upgrades.
you can't have those miniatures.
So we want to provide that kind of, we want to lower that barrier of entry from cost and from also just, learning the rules and everything. It's more accessible in both ways. So.
How many different heroes are you guys looking at?
So in the core game there are 4 heroes, and then there are 2 other 2-player starter boxes.
Yeah,
on
there's 2
Kickstarter
boxes, yeah,
that
that'll-
each have 2 more. So there's a total of 8 right from the beginning.
And
So
do
in-
those 2-player starter boxes also come with unique enemies as well?
Yeah, it'll come with a villain.
Okay.
Each one will come with a villain. So there's 2 more villains. There's 2 in the core game, plus 2 more with each of those boxes. So there's going to be 4 villains total. There's 4 issues in the core game, and then 2 in each of those boxes. So 8, right?
A
Yeah,
lot of variability.
yeah, a lot of content.
What are the backers' options then on the Kickstarter? Can you say that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we have we'll have the I think it's called the Sidekick Pledge, which is just the judge and jury 2-player starter box
Okay.
for $35. So if you aren't sure you want to dive into this game, you just want to try out one of our games, it's a great pledge for you. The next level up is just the core game by itself, which is $65, and then we have a 109 pledge, which is the core game and 2 2-player boxes, which is Jim and Ice and Judge and Jury. And that whole pledge is 109, which is a discounted pledge level. Plus, you get all the stretch goals that are unlocked with that
Ah,
pledge
I
level.
see.
So it's a similar pledge level as our previous Kickstarters, but this time you're getting those 3 separate standalone boxes. So you'll be able to play those boxes like out of the box. A 2-player box has all the dice you need, all the tokens you need. So it's all
And that's enough to go 6 players as
6
well.
player, right?
right. Yep.
Very cool.
Yep.
And when is this launch?
This
Tomorrow.
one launches.
Or today?
Yeah, it should be out right now
out
as you
today.
watch this.
November 5th.
Yeah,
yep.
if you guys have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Guys, thanks for dropping by and
Yeah.
showing this. I have to be 100% honest. I know I'm not supposed to give my opinion, but this is probably my favorite game you guys have done. It's really, really quick to play. It's very easy to teach, super accessible. It's got superheroes, which we all love.
It's always a plus.
Again, thanks for stopping by. If you have any questions, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else. And go check out the Kickstarter for everything. And we will see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.